I remember my early trading months vividly. So one day I would make these big winners, the other day I would make these big losers. And the theme of that phase of my life, that phase of my trading was having big winners, but also big losers. So the highs were high, but the lows were also very low. Until one day, in one trading session with a couple of losses, I wiped out weeks, if not months at the time of progress. And that's when I realized my winners didn't need to be bigger. I didn't need to maximize or double down on them. What I needed to do was to focus on something very straightforward, and that was minimizing my losers to then let the winners reflect. And so at that phase of my life, I also started to study loss acceptance, how humans have these laws aversion bias, the neurochemical and the neuroscience behind losing. And in this video, I packed it all up and delivered it to you in the hope you can become a better loser. So stick around. And before we dive in, I would highly appreciate you subscribe to this channel. It's all about trading, psychology, tactics, techniques to improve your trading performance. So if you want to see more of these videos, subscribe in the button below. Did you know that casinos rig near misses to keep you playing? And guess what? It's exactly the same thing in trading. Did you ever had that trade that is about to hit your take profit, but then price reverses and it triggers this impulsivity in you? Perhaps you even bail out of the trade earlier. Or a breakout that looks like a breakout, but then it turns out to be a fake out. This is the brain reward system working when dopamine gets released in the expectation of something that then doesn't happen. Studies found that dopamine, the brain's motivation chemical, is not only released when we get rewarded. When we win something, it's on the way to get there. So our anticipation of a reward actually releases more dopamine in the bloodstream than the actual reward. And that's why in the casinos, whenever you are in a slot machine, you have those figures and you have 2 or 3 figures lining up, matching with one another, and then the fourth one looks like it's about to get the same sign or the same symbol, and it just misses it. It's a barely miss. And this is on purpose. But here's what happens. The dopamine that gets unutilized doesn't just disappear from your bloodstream. What it actually does, it gives you this urge to keep playing until you win, to recuperate the lost high. And this is what happens with revenge trading. You're about to win a trade, your take profit is about to get hit, or you are in a trade where you're attached to the trading idea, so there's a lot of expectation in the narrative. When price reverses quickly, moreover, if it's quickly, if it's even more triggering normally, and stops you out, then there's this dopamine that will keep you want to play, keep you want to recuperate what your brain thought it was already yours. But in essence, it was never yours because those were unrealized profits. It's just that your brain doesn't perceive it that way. And these high expectation scenarios, they mostly happen with specific trades. Not all of the trades, especially the first trades in the session, they are normally balanced trades, valid trades, where you are still under the influence of your pre-session routine, your good preparation. But as the session evolves, it's like your expectations rise. And with that, things like a near miss, price almost getting you to take profit and then reversing, a trade that you feel attached emotionally to the narrative. This is also an high expectation scenario, or a breakout that turns out to be a fake out instead. So these type of situations are situations charged with high expectations. And these are the exact types of triggers that make traders want to impulsive trade and want to revenge trade to recuperate. It's not that they perceive that they have an option or a choice at the moment. The only solution they see is one, and that's to keep trading. So the question here is, the $1 million question is, how can you regulate your brain's chemistry to not screw you up? So here I want to talk about a study. So there was a study, and I will attach the study in the description below, where they found out that the dopamine was tied to the reward probability. And so Whenever a reward is perceived as almost guaranteed, dopamine is released in a big quantity. However, when we perceive the reward to be somewhat of uncertain, then dopamine is released in much lower quantity. So this was a huge finding, because what it means for traders is that managing expectations through your perception of an event helps you regulate the brain's chemistry to your advantage. So instead of seeing a price movement as a promise, start to see it as a possibility, and that changes everything. And the best way to do this is constantly acknowledging the anything can happen at any point in time mindset, which is much easier to start the session with. You planned your if scenarios, you are technically prepared and mentally as well, hopefully, and you come to the session. The first trades usually are valid, but then as the session progresses, this mindset, or as you take a trade and price is getting to your take profit, is very difficult to not attach expectations to that scenario. So reminding yourself that anything can happen at any point in time is key to regulate your expectations through your perception. But there's a technique that I want to share with you that's particularly effective in doing this. If you want to know more about this anything can happen mindset, I wrote a post about it, and I will leave the link in the description below. It's called Managing Expectations. And that's a technique performed in the corporative world, and it's called post-mortem analysis. So what happens is that in the corporate world, whenever there's a project with a team and a manager and whatnot, they all reunite and they create a discussion around what if the project would fail. So they pretend the project failed, and then they ask each individual, each member of the team, why would have it failed? And this has a purpose, is to predict the possible causes of failure, the possible obstacles, to then create action plans to those obstacles. And the beauty of this is that as a trader, you can incorporate the same exact mindset in your trading business. Before the session, during the session and your trades, and after the session, if you will. So before the session, predict what triggers can play as obstacles in your session. So if you are usually triggered by a loss, prepare for that scenario and write that down to kind of crystallize your action plan. And so whenever you prepare for the best, your expectations increase, but preparing for the worst, for more uncomfortable it might be, it actually gives you way more confidence. It's studied. Research tells us that predicting the worst case scenario raises our confidence to a level that helps us with performance. Another example is whenever you are in a trade, before entering the trade or as you enter, or even during the trade, asking yourself what would need to happen for this trade to get invalidated. What happens is that as you enter the market, your invalidation point is mostly on your stop loss. But as the trade goes in your favor, many times there are events or shifts in market conditions and price action that invalidate your trade even before it hits your stop loss. So maybe you want to pay attention to these invalidation rules, to these red flags during the trade, and ground yourself. And even after the trade, if it turns out to be a loser and if you get triggered, step back and ground yourself in your best trader mindset. So what can happen worst? Sometimes we have one loss or two consecutive losers, and we think our brain perceives it as this catastrophic event, and it gives it so much meaning that we don't see what else can be worse. And that's the real danger. We are blind to risk. What happens often is that we keep on trading until we hit a big drawdown, and at the end of the day, we think for ourselves, if only I would have been able to stop myself here after these two losses. So we want to push this same awareness to these moments. And so this approach of performing this post-mortem analysis before, during, and after each trade does two things for you. It grounds your expectations, which in turn shapes your perception and the way the neurotransmitters get released in your body, and it helps you react logically, not emotionally. So if price goes against you, that's no surprise. You know you are prepared for it. You've been rehearsing that same mindset and the possibility of a loss before session or as you enter the trade. And so you're ready to take in the loss. And if price goes in your favor, you're able to manage your expectations as well. Because you're grounded in the acceptance of a loser, you're way more prepared to avoid that overconfidence and overexcitement. So, I don't know if you're noticing, but there's a pattern here. The more you accept the pain, and pain is different for each trader. Some traders have more pain from fear of missing out, other traders from loss, other traders from whatever it might be. But whatever is the most painful scenario for you in trading, that's the one when you need to build acceptance and make peace with. And that's where the key lies. It doesn't lie from trying to avoid that scenario. It lies from you approaching your fears head on and start rehearsing a new response. All right, so now let's put this in practice. There's an action plan I would like you to follow through with, and that's creating your own loss ritual. And the loss ritual is simply a routine of the step-by-step routine that you perform after each loss. And obviously there are losses that are more triggering than others, right? Not all losses are well accepted or equally accepted. So for example, a valid loser perhaps is better accepted by yourself than a loser made with mistakes, whatever it might be. Now, what we're here trying to create is a prevention plan with a very objective cue, which is every time you lose, performing this ritual. So the cue is a loss. So I'm giving you the loss ritual that I typically use with many of the traders I coach, and that works. And that's why I'm offering you this today. And so the step number one is stepping back for 5 minutes. And this is different for each person, but in essence, 5 minutes is enough to reestablish your brain chemistry, to get out of the survival instinct, to stop being triggered. And the goal of these 5 minutes is to reduce your emotional intensity. Because if you try to force a new perspective while your emotions are running high, that is useless. So first, we want to reduce that emotional intensity. And then step number 2 is reframing your perspective of the event. So now that you are ready to flip the script and see the other side of the coin, I want you to ask yourself, what is the extra piece of information the market is giving me by stopping me out? And then, how can I use this in my next opportunity? What this does is grounding you in the positive side of the event. Obviously, nobody likes to lose, and it's not required from you. Nobody is asking for you to love to lose in order to become a successful trader. What you need to do is develop an indifference to losing. So whenever you lose, you're no longer triggered on a high level. You are indifferent to it, right? So that's way different than loving to lose. And what this loss ritual does is exactly that, but it starts with practice. So if you do nothing different, your behavior will keep on going. So if you want to become a great loser, or at least a better loser, I strongly advise you to put together these 3 steps. These are guidelines, but edit them as you wish, and they must include a way to reduce your emotional intensity first, and only then reframing your perspective to seeing the other side of the coin. Now, what is your biggest struggle handling losers? I would like you to leave me your answer in the comments below, and hopefully I can give you some guidance or some advice. Thank you. If you found this video helpful, I would kindly ask you to hit the like button and subscribe. So this channel is all about trading psychology and maximizing your performance to mitigate trading mistakes and achieve this precision and quality of execution. So if you are a trader, if you have an edge or a framework you operate, a strategy, I strongly advise you subscribe. See you next time.